All right. Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Board of Education for the Appleton Area School District. My name is Kay Eggert, and first roll call of fellow board members, starting with Peng Tao.
Here.
Nick Ross.
Here.
Jason Kolpak.
Here.
Sauter.
Here.
Edward Ruffalo.
Here.
James Bacon. Okay, just again, as a reminder, anyone that might be joining us via Zoom, the materials for tonight's meeting can be found on board docs, which can be linked to through the district website. So I will, please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So are there any, do board members have any requests to remove any of the consent agenda items for separate consideration tonight? Okay, seeing none, then could I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda as written?
So moved.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Okay, seeing none, then all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So we would now have an opportunity for special presentations. We're going to switch the order because our student school board representative is not here yet. We do anticipate that she will be arriving. So we will start with 3B, and I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Greg Harches, Superintendent Harches.
Great, thank you. So as Kayla brings up the PowerPoint, I'll just give a little introduction. So a few weeks ago, we were asked to respond to an article that Wisconsin Public Radio was writing on pandemic recovery research. And Steve Harrison responded for the district with some comments. And then he went back and he found the research that was the impetus for the story. And when the study shows, well, what the study shows is that 3rd through 8th graders in the Appleton Area School District recovered from learning losses during the pandemic at a rate that was higher than the state average and the national average. And we certainly believe that it's because of the way we spent our ESSER dollars. We spent our ESSER dollars on people, staff members that would work directly with students. And so a lot of districts did different things. Some spent theirs on facilities, spent theirs on improving air conditioning in their building, materials, equipment. Some spent their dollars on operations. In fact, when we voiced concerns to our legislators about the 21 through 23 biennial budget and the fact that it didn't include a revenue increase, many of our legislators said, well, use your ESSER dollars to backfill your operations. And we weren't willing to do that. We just simply said, it's not what the money was intended for. And we felt like our students needed specifically interventionists and support staff to spend time with them. And so that's how we spent our dollars. Now, I shared this with staff in a video recently, so you may have seen that video, but I do want to give you a little bit more detail on this. So let me start with what the research said. It was put together by the Center for Education Policy and Research at Harvard in cooperation with the Educational Opportunity Project at Stanford University. And it was first, like I said, reported to us by Wisconsin Public Radio. And what they said is that the average student in grades 3 through 8 lost the equivalent of half a grade level in math achievement and a third of grade level in reading achievement during the pandemic. And then it basically took state test results and adjusted them for differences in proficiencies across the 50 states. In our state, that's the forward exam. So it's our 3rd through 8th forward exam, which you hear the results of those scores often. Another interesting point that I found in there is that they said a student to catch up for that third of a grade level or half of a grade level would need to learn at 125% of typical growth for 2 straight years to recover. And so when you see our data, you're going to see how well we did with helping students recover. Now, there are 4 states that fully recovered in English and 2 in math, and districts with higher poverty levels had a slower recovery. So again, we would be considered a district with higher poverty levels, but that didn't bear out for us. And then we were one of 3 districts that were recognized in the article as having shown 2019 levels already in 2023. The other 2 were Howard Swamico and Elmbrook. Both of them are very affluent districts. And so we should take a lot of pride in the results of this survey. The next item here is I just want to review the ESSER spending, and it starts with site priorities. So what we did is we allocated to each of our schools a dollar amount per weighted student pupil. So it was their enrollment based on a weighted funding model that we have. And so for the high schools, it was a significant amount. It was over $100,000 in each year. And our middle schools were between 50 and 100,000. Our elementary schools were less than that. And then the schools worked with their staff. Our principals worked with their staff and their parents, if appropriate, through the PTA to decide how best to meet the needs of kids who had some gaps that occurred during the pandemic. And so they put together just a variety of different supports for students, from before school, after school, lunch hour, extended summertime, what do we call that? Sorry, Mr. Hernandez, our Chance 3 option, correct? Option 3, thank you. Option 3 at the high school came out of that work, and we've carried that over post-pandemic. So we started there, and then we had some district positions that we put in place. So elementary math interventionists, we had 11 elementary math interventionists across our district. Middle school math and reading interventionists, EMLSS behavior coaches. We added EL staff, so those are students that are learning English as a second language, so interpreters, teachers, and refugee support. We created positions called community coordinators for our Hmong students and families, our Latinx students and families, and African American students and families, middle school alternative ed staff, and then middle and high school instructional coaches. So as you can see, we put our dollars into people, into staff to work with kids. And we knew that there would come a time when the ESSER dollars were going to go away, and we would have to cut some of those positions. And that's where we are now. We have to cut some of these for next year. But again, we felt like this was the best way for us to close the gaps that were exacerbated by the pandemic. So let me show you the first data point here. And so this is math performance in Appleton, compares to the state and then to 5 similar districts. And this, when you look at it, it's grades 3 through 8. So I'll take you through the chart on the left with the arrows, and then the numeric equivalents are on the right. So when you look at Appleton Area School District, you'll see that purple arrow. So where we started in 2019, so before the pandemic, we were 0.38 above the grade level equivalent relative to 2019 national average. We were slightly lower than the state average in math. So the state average was 0.41 above the national average. And then the third set of arrows, you see the very long purple arrow, those are 5 districts that this study deemed were the closest to us in terms of size and demographics. So it was La Crosse, Eau Claire, Oshkosh, Green Bay, and Sheboygan. So those 5 districts came together. And so you can see their average was lower than ours going into the pandemic. Then the actual length of the purple arrow is the loss during the pandemic, or the decrease. And so you can see that we went down by 0.34. The state went down by 0.37, and those 5 other districts that are closest to us went down 0.55. And then the green, bluish green arrow, I'm not sure what color that is, that one is going to show the recovery post-pandemic. And so you can see where we went up 0.30, the state as an average went up 0.2, and then those other 5 districts went up on average 0.13. So in terms of math performance in grades 3 through 8, we went from being below average at the state level to above the state average. And also you can see significantly above where those other 5 districts that closely resemble are in terms of demographics. So any questions on the math data?
Right, what were those 5 districts again? La Crosse,
Eau Claire, Green Bay, Oshkosh, and Sheboygan.
thank you.
Now, we often would consider ourselves closer in terms of size to Racine and Kenosha, not necessarily demographics. So our demographics probably are a little closer here. And then the other district we often will use is Waukesha, but for whatever reason, this study had these 5 districts.
And just to clarify, we're looking like the numbers, the 0.34 decrease and the 0.3 increase is grade level equivalent. So the equivalent of a third of the year's learning
Right.
is
correct.
what we're talking about, losing, and then almost that third or 3/10 getting it back up. Is
Correct.
how I would interpret it. Thank you.
Okay, the next slide shows the reading scores. And this is really interesting. So when you look at our reading score going into the pandemic, we were below the national average and below the state average. But during the pandemic, we actually went up in comparison. And so you can see that brown arrow is very small for us and it points up during the pandemic. And the only thing we can attribute that to is the fact that we were immediate in our response when ESSER dollars came to us. So as soon as we got the ESSER dollars, we put them into play right away. So in the spring semester of the 2021 school year, we found out in December that we were going to get ESSER dollars. We didn't actually get them until March, but we were spending them already in February. So, and we were putting them into, really it was about how do we get more help for kids? So again, lunch hours, before school, after school, a lot of hard work by a lot of people. And then it was during that time that we started to talk about what about additional positions that we would hire for the 21-22 school year, which we did. But anyway, think that attributed to the fact that we were better than the national average and we started going up immediately. You can see where the state went down and then those other local districts or those other districts in the state went down even more. And then our recovery has been better than the state average. I shouldn't say that. We're right 0.01 below the state average of recovery, but the state had more to recover from than we did. And then again, significantly better than those other districts. So questions on reading here? Okay, and then I have one more for you. And so this is a scatter plot. As you move from the left to the right, districts get a higher proportion of free and reduced lunch or free and reduced meals. So you can think of that as going from left to right. The districts have higher levels of poverty, as you would say. The larger the circle, the higher the enrollment for the district. And then as we go from the bottom of the chart up, you're going to see the positive change in reading achievement in grade level equivalence. And so ultimately what you see is Appleton there, of all the large districts in the state, had the highest change in reading achievement, which is just really a phenomenal result. That's something, again, we should be very, very proud of. And, you know, all the decisions that were made around the pandemic and what we did with our ESSER dollars clearly paid off. I think it validates the decisions we made. I think it validates all the hard work that people put in during those years, very challenging years, to make sure that our kids got what they needed in terms of recovery. And so the other district that you can see up there on the left, way up on the top left, Elmbrook, that is one of the other. So Howard Suamico must be one of the smaller gray ones in here, but they were smaller, so they didn't get the name of their district there. But something I think, again, we should be really proud of. We had been asked often during the pandemic how we were spending our ESSER dollars. It was something that community members asked about, and we would always share. And we're going to do the same thing in our next district digest is we'll try to, as succinctly as possible, try to put this information out there. And just so that our community knows that we made really good decisions around how to spend our ESSER funds. We're sad they're going away because they did a lot of good things for kids. But, again, we really are gratified by the results.
Thank you. And I do recall those meetings with the legislators and they said, well, just use your ESSER funds. We're like, I can't do that. That's not what it's for. But anyways, now we can go back and, so certainly it was good work and as you said, good decision making. So thank you for that. Okay. So we are going to continue on with a bit of the meeting. And we'll circle back. Our school board representative will be here shortly. Next it would be an opportunity for public input, but I don't believe we have any public input. So we will move then to item 5. This would be board development. And we just wanted to check in. This would be regarding coming up in May, there's an opportunity to go to Sun Prairie for a little conference with other current school boards who are using coherent governance. And so there are 3 board members now have indicated an interest, or 4? 4. So this 2 implications, we do have a board work session scheduled that morning. So if we have enough interest, we'll need to go to the conference, we'll need to reschedule that board work session. So the fact that we have 4 board members, I think we will need to reschedule that work session. But then the second part of the people organizing that conference have asked for any feedback on potential topics for the afternoon. We'll have some opportunities to share, like breakout sessions or to do some sharing. And so asking for some feedback on topics that could be of interest to individuals. And I do believe that some people have stepped forward and shared some topics. But I want to open it up in case you haven't had an opportunity to respond to the email. Are there any other topics that come to mind of things that, you just would like maybe to be covered?
May we send that via email, Kay?
Yes.
Perfect. I'll do
Yes.
that.
Okay. And then we'll send it on. But want to just give that opportunity if there's anything right now. Otherwise, go ahead, James.
Would you prefer just to send it via email, or would you prefer it in this space? Does it matter?
Doesn't matter. I think if you have something you'd like to bring up, sometimes it helps to just hear verbally what people are thinking if we need any clarification.
Sure. 2 things that come to mind, and I don't know what has already been shared via email, but would be probably, I guess, the topic of how to measure, or track progress, like how we're measuring progress towards all the goals, especially those that are more results versus operational. That's just something that's come up a lot in our conversations. Then I think probably even just like as a bigger topic, like how do we help coherent governance, I guess, kind of like help focus us? It just feels like we spend a lot of time getting caught up in both big picture and the weeds. And sometimes it feels like we aren't leveraging it or haven't found out yet the best way to kind of, make it an efficient way to do all the things we need to do, but really also focus our efforts, I suppose, as, a board with what matters most or something like that, I guess, is kind of where my head goes a little bit with it personally, and I won't be able to be there. So I don't know if me sharing these topics is actually helpful, since I won't be able to attend a breakout session should they pick one of those topics, but I don't know if that resonates with others, but that's where my head goes.
No, it's helpful to hear what you're thinking. So thank you. Go
Thank you,
ahead.
James, for that broad help clarify something in my mind, which I will share now, is, we've spent an awful lot of time on the coherence, governance, process and structure. And at some point, it kind of feels like we have to shift into, it starts working for us, we stop working for it. You know what I mean? We're putting an awful lot of time and energy into developing all the OEs and the results policies and all of that work. And I know there's only so many hours in the day for on our leadership staff as well. So I'm looking for how do we make that transition from, okay, we have what we have, let's start running with it, and let's hopefully start seeing some of the benefits. I think there's a lot of good things in it. It really seems to be designed to make sure that nothing gets lost in the overall busyness of the year, that we're revisiting every topic gets touched and looked at. But so far, we're spending a lot of time on the process and not in the process, so to speak.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the kind of thought that Mr. Ruffalo and Mr. Bacon indicated, and like, the options that are being offered talk about that in different ways. And so, yeah, I mean, like understanding the distinction between like one of the options they list as authority of the superintendent. Superintendent is not expected to seek board approval or authority for any such decisions falling within the superintendent's area of delegated authority. So like learning more from other people who do coherent governance about how other districts define the distinction between operational and like results policy stuff, not because I necessarily think we're doing things wrong, but just to like, get an understanding from like kind of more global perspective on what that means. There's also an option on revising and updating results policies. So I feel like a lot of what you talked about would get worked into a session on that. And then, they say onboarding new members to coherent governance. And while like we may not have new members for a couple of years, I just think about like, it's more about gaining more insight into how coherent governance operates effectively in other districts to see if we can use any of those strategies or just how we're doing things to improve what we do. And my last thought would be they also offer an option called designing a board annual work plan. And that is interesting to me, just thinking about, I know a lot goes on behind the scenes with planning agendas and stuff like that, but to kind of think more about how we as a board, as a whole board can, plan our work and contribute to all of that, so.
I was going to say that I was interested also in just looking at operational versus board business, because that seems to be an area where there's, some discussion often. So I would appreciate that. And then just seeing how other districts have maybe evolved through the process of CG, because like James and Ed said, sometimes it seems like we're really involved in putting it together and not kind of helping us to make decisions easier. So I would agree with colleagues.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. If there's anything else that you think of at another time, just forward it to, email it to Kayla. And then we'll get these ideas submitted to Sun Prairie. So thank you. So we're going to circle back to special presentation and welcome Lauren Choi from Appleton North, our school board representative. So welcome, Lauren, and happy you can be here to share a little bit about what's going on at North.
Hi, everyone. I haven't seen you since January, so it's nice to see everyone again. In January, we kind of wrapped up all of our donation drives. We had a lot of those going on. I believe we had 3 through all of our clubs. And we had our January 27th winter dance. It was super well received and everybody really enjoyed it. And then starting in February, we had our forecast, which is a school announcement broadcast for the whole school during homerooms. It was in replacement of the Rodley show that we have at North. And we also started in February posting on our seniors future plans page where all the seniors are going to go like for college or what they're going to do for a profession after high school. And then second week of February, we had Love Struck Week, which is just an annual fun little week that we have for Spirit Days. And Mondays we had PJs. Tuesday we had Peace and Love, which is kind of like hippies day. And then Wednesday we had Blackout. Thursday we had Golf Dads versus Soccer Moms, which was super fun. And on Friday we had Pink and Red Day, which was also the day of our pep rally. And our pep rally was great, super well received. And we did musical chairs and we had a teacher dance that was coordinated by Mrs. Brewsda, who's one of our math teachers. And we also had a Rochambeau competition that day. And it was super cool. We distributed beads, just like Mardi Gras beads on Monday. And everybody had one. They were all blue beads, and then all of the teachers got gold ones. And then you would play rock, paper, scissors to receive somebody else's beads. So we had our finals during that pep rally, and it was just super fun. We had like a spotlight, and everybody liked it. So it was pretty good. And then in March, we started our Help the Homeless drive, which I believe all the 3 Appleton schools are doing. And sports, we have our performance team that won second place at the state championships. And then in wrestling, Brock Arndt was our second place runner-up. Jake Stoffel won his second state championship. And our boys basketball and girls basketball wrapped up their WIAA season at regionals. And the North Adapted Sports League, which we also started this year, was floor hockey, and they wrapped up their season 9-5. Track and field also started today, and we got poured on, but it was super fun. It was a really good practice, and what a way to kick off the season. And then kind of last thing were clubs and arts. The Appleton Forensics Public Speaking team was recognized as the most polite and respectful students at our last competition, which was super nice, and we just loved that competition. DECA had their annual SCDC competition and had 8 people take home titles and DECA glass. And NHS is having their Easter event coming up on March 25th. It's a community involvement with all of our neighbors and just a big community full of like Easter egg hunting and just fun kind of activities for the kids that are in their community. And then in the arts, we have Appleton North's choir, who are displaying their annual Northside Choral Festival on March 19th. And our last thing is our musical, which is starting next week, and they put in a lot of work into Anastasia. So it's super cool, and I see all the sets, and they're doing a great job.
So I take it you're out for track and you got caught in the rain today. Okay. That's so awesome though, that you think it was a nice way to start the season. So that's good. Any other questions from board members? Very full report.
Yeah.
So a lot going on.
Did the winner of the Rochambeau competition get anything other than just thousands of beads?
It was actually a teacher who won. It was Mr. Andres, and he got all of the beads, I'm pretty sure, like 1,000 ? And we just made like a little basket full of just like Love Struck kind of stuff with candy and everything. So I hope he enjoyed it.
That's funny.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Appreciate you coming in and sharing. We'll see you the next time. So thank you very much. Okay, so continuing with our agenda, we will now go to item 6. The first business services update. Holly Burr is with us.
Good evening, and Business Services has just the one item for your consideration tonight, which is the accounts payable check register for February. The details are included in your item for consideration, and this item has been moved from the superintendent's consent agenda to board business. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Then school and student services update, Dr. Harrison with 6th and 7th grade curriculum revisions.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. School Services, Student Services has an item for consideration tonight. This is the 6th and 7th grade curriculum revisions that were presented during the February 26th board meeting by members of the ACNI department. This is item 8A of the superintendent's consent agenda, and it is our recommendation that this be approved. Any questions?
I do not see any in the room, so thank you very much. And then next would be personnel services update, Julie King.
Yes, good evening. Personnel Services has 3 items for the board's consideration on the superintendent's consent agenda. Those include 2 new educator hires, 1 educator resignation, and then professional educator contracts for the 2024-25 school year. There are 1,248 educator contracts to meet the needs of our students for the upcoming school year. Any questions on these items?
I don't see any, Julie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're now going to move to the board's consent agenda, which is just one set of meeting minutes. That would be from February 26th. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, then roll call, please. Kayla?
Nick Ross,
Aye.
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
James Bacon.
Aye.
Peng Tao,
Aye.
Chris Sauter,
Aye.
Kay Eggert,
Aye.
and Ed Barufalo.
Aye.
And then next would be the superintendent's consent agenda. Superintendent Hargis?
The superintendent's consent agenda includes 4 items for your consideration. The first item, 8A, was briefly reported on by Dr. Steve Harrison during his school services update. And then items 8B through D were reported on by Julie King during her personnel services update. And I recommend approval of these 4 items, 8A through D.
Excuse me. I apologize. I did not do this earlier, but due to a potential conflict of interest, I actually would ask that the item 8C be separated out.
I think we can't separate it out now, so then maybe just abstain from voting on the consent agenda.
Okay, I will, due to potential conflict of interest, abstain from voting on the consent agenda.
Okay.
I will move to approve the superintendent's consent agenda, items 8A through 8D. Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Chris Sauter,
Aye.
Ed Ruffalo,
Aye.
James Bacon,
Aye.
Peng Tao,
Aye.
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
Kay Eggert,
Aye.
and Nick Ross.
Abstain.
Thank you.
Okay, then we're going to move to reports, and we have a report from Business Services, and this would be our 2024-25 budget projection. Holly.
Good evening again. So we spoke, last week. A little bit about the current year and the status we have. So now we're gonna kind of have a series of these over the next to kind of start prepping for the new budget year. So we have started the discussions and some of the preparations for next year. Obviously, Sherry and her crew is working very hard on transitioning the sixth graders. And there's a lot of logistics in a lot of that. And the budget kind of has to follow suit with all of those actual physical logistical changes. The budget has to follow those as well. So we've kind of started the process a little bit earlier than normal for that reason, but also to include those significant changes. It is still very early in the process. So at this point, what we're looking at here is potentials and big picture kind of items. And again, we will be discussing the detail in further detail at a future meeting and continue discussions for the next several months. Got it. There we go. So we'll start the discussion off tonight with for the 24-25 budget with just a look at the fund balance. We spend a lot of time talking about revenues and expenses, but a lot of times we also want to take a look at our fund balance and just, you know, how is the budget going to be impacted over the next several years. So current projection is to end this year, 23-24, with a deficit, putting our total fund balance at about 59.3 million. Now, this number is very important for cash flow, but the number we want to concentrate on for budgeting purposes is the unrestricted portion. This is expected to be around 14.6 million, but at the end of the fiscal year. The question that we need to ask ourselves is how long can we sustain deficit budgets without negatively impacting cash flow? At a rate of about 5 million deficit each year, this would only allow us 2 to 3 years, depending on other one-time purchases that we make during the year. This also coincides with our current policy. Policy currently states that we should maintain in our fund balance between 20 to 25% of expenditures. If we drop below that amount, we would again need to short-term borrow during the fall to cover expenses until revenues are received in December.
And that 2 to 3 years is simply the unrestricted fund balance divided by 5 million. Okay.
Yeah. Again, just kind of big picture right now. Nothing is even remotely set in stone yet. General fund revenues then are currently projecting out to be about 6.5 million increase overall. This is made up of about 5.3 in revenue limit changes. So coming out of state aid and tax levy. And again, this is assuming a slight decline in our district membership. And by slight, I mean 30 to 50 students. And then also just a reminder, I just put it on here. I know Greg just talked about it as well, that ESSER is ending at the end of this year. So the current expenditures in 23-24 right now of about 2.5 million, we won't have that funding anymore. It's done, it's gone. Moving on to
Can I ask
expenditure.
a quick question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with the ESSER funds going away, much of our ESSER funded positions, so to speak, how much of that 2.5 million are we not carrying forward by not carrying forward positions? And how much of it's gonna have to be covered now by our own internal budget?
So I don't have exact details with me tonight on that, but we will be discussing that moving forward as we talk about staffing changes and things like that. Previously, we had approved a few positions that we knew for sure that we wanted to keep. Last year already, some of the cultural support positions. Greg, you're gonna have to refresh my memory. There was some of those, and then currently this year, we also, as a leadership, prioritize some positions. So a few of the interventionists that Greg had mentioned earlier, but only like 5 or 6 of them. We simply cannot sustain, obviously, the level that we were doing, but we have prioritized that we do need to keep some of those positions. Moving forward, I'll get you the exact number, but I'm gonna say it's right around between those two, what we approved last year and what we approved this year. I'm gonna say it's around $1 million. Mhm.
Just kind of a big picture, we kept elementary positions, some of them, all the middle and high school positions went away. And out of the 11 math interventionists at the elementary level, 6 went away, we kept 5. And then all of the site dollars that we had been doing, that went away this year already.
I have a question. Would there be any other opportunities for other federal grant dollars or state dollars that would support these positions moving forward?
Not that I'm aware of. You know, we apply for every opportunity that we have, basically. I have not heard of anything that's going to replace this funding. So even though we used it how it was intended by the federal government, yeah, I have not heard anything that's going to be replacing it.
Something to put a pin in, and don't know how effective it would be, but you know, the WASB delegation could pass a resolution potentially that asks the state to provide resources to like carry through its Act 20 mandate. You know, we can ask for that, we can advocate for that. That's something we would like to do.
Any support we can get for anything like that, Nick? Yes, please. I know there is some discussion about supporting the Act 20. We've had no confirmations on the actual funding that's going to be available. Okay, moving on to expenses then. For Fund 10 for next year are currently estimated at about $14 million. This includes existing deficit, staffing changes, compensation and benefit increases, referendum additions, operating increases, and also one-time curriculum purchases. So again, big picture, round numbers, we will be tweaking all of this, but right now, our first blush at this is these would be our expenses for next year.
Just to clarify, this would be the additional expenses above and beyond.
Yeah,
Just, I mean, because, I mean, our budget's way more. I just wanted to, so this is more than our.
yeah, so new dollars
Yeah.
is 12 million, because I did include in this number the existing, at least a 2 million existing deficit moving forward.
I do want to mention that when you see a referendum dollars, those are additional expenses that we're taking on next year, but they're cost neutral because we passed a referendum to pay for those. So it comes in as revenue and then it goes out as expenses. Just so you know that that's not new unfunded increase. It's just the actual revenue increase from the state is not that full $5.3 million. Some of that is referendum funding as well.
Thank you for that clarification. That was confusing, and I thought, well, maybe this was additional because we talked about some additional, perhaps some additions to the referendum that maybe were not covered with what we originally planning to do. But so we'll get more clarification on this. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but thanks for that clarification, Greg, that yes, this
Okay.
is planned expenses of the referendum.
Does that include some of the operational cost as well, or is that due to inflation and other?
It's primarily the STEM positions.
Yep.
And then some of the operational, right? We now next year are going to have maintenance, cleaning, utilities on all the new spaces. We already, why it's not that full 5 million is we've already been spending money this current year on some of the operations, but then all the K-1-2 class size reductions. Principal next year for Sandy Slope. So yeah, it comes in 2 different years that we increase our expenditures there.
So the 2.4 in operational expenses on this, that's purely inflation and other increases.
Correct. Yeah, so that operational number is purely inflation, increased contract costs, things like that.
And then just one more clarification. I thought we asked about this last week. The VNS, the purchase for that space that will already have come out of fund balance. So
Right.
your estimate of starting the
Yeah,
year at
the slide where I had the 14 and I don't know why this won't back up, but the first slide I had where the unrestricted fund balance of the 14 has those monies already out.
okay, thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions on expenses?
I do want to add, so when you see one-time purchase, $2 million for reading curriculum, that's what Board Member Ross was speaking to in terms of the Act 20. And, you know, when originally the act came out, we were told that 50% of the cost for instructional materials would be covered by the state. We're now hearing that's not the case.
Okay, then. As Kay just mentioned, then we'll just talk about the impact then on the fund balance again. Those are some big numbers. And again, I'll just remind you, it's early in the process. We are going to tweak these, but just so you get a feel of what can easily and quickly happen. New revenues are 6.5 million, and we just talked about our total expenses, including the existing deficit carrying forward, could potentially be up to 14 million. That would leave us at a deficit of 7.5 for next year. Applying that to our fund balance of the 14.5 would leave us with just a little over $7 million. Of that, of the 7.5 deficit, about 5.5 would be recurring moving forward. So we're going to have to be a little creative, a little cautious on what we all build into these budgets as a reoccurring deficit. Because as you can see, this leaves us with 2 years then of fund balance available.
So it took me a second, but just to be explicit, the difference between the 7.5 and the 5.5 is the $2 million in reading curriculum.
Correct. Because that is a one-time.
Have you already factored in the Valley New School purchase?
Yes. Yeah, that's actually gonna come out of this current year's 23-24. So as we talk about this year ending, I'll just remind you and the public that yes, we did approve that $900,000 expenditure out of this year's. It'll show as a negative for this year. It'll come off the fund balance. So when I'm projecting numbers for next year, I'm already subtracting that out. Yeah, that is not in addition to this.
And can you remind me, what was the planned deficit for this year when we budgeted?
The plan deficit for this year is about 3.2, 3.3, right in that range.
That's where we're trending. What was the plan for at when the budget was set a year ago?
Oh, that's what it was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm expecting the ongoing amount to be a little bit less.
Okay. So the deficit has increased by $1.5 million over the past year.
I'm sorry?
The deficit has increased $1.5 million since last year. So you said we were at 3.9. Now we're saying that recurring deficit moving forward would be 5.5.
Oh, for next year.
The deficit is growing.
Yes.
Thank you.
As we increase expenses that are ongoing, you know, and I don't know if I can go back. There we go. I can't go back. You know, staffing, compensation, benefits, operations, all of those items, even the referendum dollars, because those are basically operations and staffing till we just separated it out because it was referendum approved. Those are all ongoing reoccurring expenses that are not going to go away. And so that's where I'm just cautioning us that, you know, we have to make some very strategic decisions here in the next couple of years to maintain our really good financial status, which, you know, we are sitting still very well, but
Okay. Thank you. Obviously, more to come. Okay. We are going to move to 9B. First, school and student services report regarding summer school courses for 2024. Sherry Garvey.
Good evening. So each year we bring to the Board of Education our course offerings for the 2024 school year. And we're pretty excited about the academic support and credit recovery and enrichment that we'll provide for our students. So I'm just going to do a few highlights for our summer school programming for 2024 that we're recommending for information to you, and you will then approve that in a couple of weeks. So a couple of highlights. Our initial registration will begin on April 15th. High school registration will also begin at that time, and that's typically done through their school counselors. Just working through some of those things that those students need at the high school level. So our summer school dates are June 10th through July 3rd. And as you may recall, last year we were awarded an additional ESSER dollar grant. And so we're excited that this year we'll have a full programming through our Boys and Girls Club, which is our partner through that. So a variety of different options. So in those schools that are listed in the item of information, you can see that we will be doing an extended program. So they'll have 4 weeks of summer school and then 2 additional weeks called the Summer Boost program. And so those sites that already have a Boys and Girls Club program will have 2 weeks of additional programming, which will be social and emotional learning and some of the Boys and Girls Club programming. And then those sites that do not have a program, we're offering transportation to the Boys and Girls Club. So pretty excited about that and that opportunity for our students. So additionally, a couple of other highlights that I would like to share with you at the elementary, you'll notice some elementary additional STEM offerings. We did make a few changes. I'm glad Dr. Willer is in the room, but we did make some changes with some of our reading adventures. So that's offered for all of our grade level. As we are shifting to a more structured literacy, we made some changes to that course in that class for our students. One of the things you may notice, and this is something that we've always done for our students, is that at the elementary level, when a student is transitioning to middle level, we allow them to stay at the elementary level for summer school or go to their middle school. So this year we have that unique year where we have 5th and 6th grade students transitioning. Typically, students choose to go to the middle level and go through that. So we will continue to still offer that if they wanted to. So at the elementary offerings, it shows grades 2 through 7, and that is why. So that's why that's listed, just so that when the families do register or the students register, they will be viewing that they're a middle school student. So we're excited about that, but we would always offer if they reached out and wanted to stay, and many times it's just because they want to keep their family together. Keep all the students if they have younger siblings at the elementary level, but we always offer that. At the middle level, a variety of different athletic opportunities. There's been some nice collaboration with our high schools, increasing our STEM offerings, and this year, we're building into an August offering. It's called Welcome to Middle School. So all of our middle schools will be creating a nice opportunity for our students, our 5th and 6th grade students, so they can participate in full summer school programming but then a little bit later, closer to August, we'll run a 2-3 couple day program for our 5th and 6th grade students to just be in the building. So we're very excited about that, and we're going to offer that through summer school. You can see at the high school, we've continued to expand our different offerings for summer school. So you'll see 4 offerings. The majority of our students consider option 1, which is held at Appleton East High School. But then we also offer option 2. It's offered for our sites, and they typically work with their alternative ed programming and our staff using E2020 or that computer-based program. Option 3 is something that Superintendent Hart just referenced earlier, is something that we've offered to our students. We started that coming out of 21-22, and we've continued that as another option. They work with their school counselor, and a lot of times the teacher will recommend they just need to work on these certain things in order to continue. And so option 3 is another option. And then option 4 is a few options that we do offer in summer school that are somewhat unique that we offer for new credit. So that's just a quick synopsis of summer school. And any questions?
Sherry, just 2 things for you. First of all, my compliments to you and your team. I'm always so impressed with the variety. Just a really nice way these classes are put together. A lot of really exciting things here for students. There's a couple of them I'm sorry I can't take. But I always get a little concerned, and I think you have the answer for this. In fact, I know you do, but if you think about it, the costs seem low, but if you have multiple children and they take a few classes, it could add up to be quite a bit. It might be challenging for some of our families. So what do we do to help families that maybe couldn't afford something like the summer school programs? And then most importantly, how are they made aware of that in a way that's, confidential and discreet for them?
Yeah, good question. I think we asked that a little bit last year and talked through that. And so again, the summer school team, our summer school coordinators work through that with the family. Also, Mr. Todd Kadoff and Carrie work through that with the family, and we communicate that. When we go through the registration process, we do add that communication in there in terms of if they need support related to that. Some, we don't have any fees connected to that. So we monitor that pretty closely. So it takes a lot of people to just be aware and just make sure that families know who they need to reach out to have that conversation to figure that out.
And certainly no student is ever turned away.
No, absolutely not.
Go ahead, Chris.
On the high school option, there's a getting ready for 9th grade at East High School. Is that just for East, or is that all students who would be able to participate in that?
So getting ready for high school in 9th grade used to be something that all of our schools used to offer. And then we did a variety of different things. So East is offering it this year to bring that back to see what that would look like. And we will probably need to take a look at the success of that and related to that. But it was something that we used to offer. and stepped away from that. And we're going to try to bring that back as something a little bit unique for some students. It is a new credit course, and so it is something that we're bringing back, but we'll have to monitor that to see about how successful that was, what the enrollment was, and what that allowed for us to be able to look at all 3 high schools. So we're bringing it back and seeing how that goes at one high school.
So just East students.
Just
this year
East,
then.
yes, for
Thank
this
you.
year.
Okay, so thank you.
Yep.
And then we will actually be asked to approve these at probably, well, not in 2 weeks, upcoming. Okay,
All right, thank
Wonderful.
you.
thank you. And then next we will have the 2023-24 Achievement Gap Reduction Mid-Year Report. Nan Banau and team.
You don't need
Kayla, could we get the PowerPoint up? So tonight's item is an item of information. We are here to, as the fearless AGR lead team, to come and present our semi-annual report. So I know me, but I'm also joined by Anne Marie Worley Gonzalez, who's the principal at Badger. Dr. Carrie Willer, who is our Director of Elementary Education, and Katie Schmelzer, who is our principal at Edison. So just to bring everybody up to speed as far as what AGR is. AGR is a state program that allows participating schools to meet obligations of a 5-year contract. And with that contract, we would be implementing one or more of these 3 strategies. And the strategy that our 7 AGR schools follows in Appleton would be lower class size. And so with the AGR contract, you're required to go no higher than 18 students to 1 teacher or 30 students to 2 teachers. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, and we may have 19 that are there, and then you can supplement with an additional strategy. Most likely, we would be looking at the instructional coaching to work with that teacher in that AGR classroom. But when we had our ESSER tutors, ESSER subs, we often would also do the tutoring with that licensed teacher. So each school is required to create performance objectives. And the goal with these performance objectives is to reduce the achievement gap for low-income students. Originally, when this was the SAGE program, all of our schools had different performance objectives, but over the years, we've decided to join forces. And each of the 7 schools have the same performance objectives, which you'll hear tonight. They may have different goals based on their data, but they have the same performance objectives. And then we receive AGR payments based on our low-income student enrollment. And that goes to support the additional staff that we need to lower class size. Who is in our AGR schools? You can see the schools listed up there. If you remember, we substituted Highlands for Columbus just this year, first year that Highlands has joined us as an AGR school. Columbus still is receiving staffing to be at the same class size as the AGR schools. But with this, we were able to, because of just the larger enrollment at Highlands, we were able to provide that support to more students. One thing with the grant is that we need to come before you twice a year, like I said, to review our implementation and provide our progress at the end of the semester.
So tonight we're going to talk to you a little bit about some of our outcome data. And our outcome data that we will be referencing will be iReady. The goal for our AGR performance objectives in both reading and or math are listed for you to see. We are looking to increase the typical growth in reading and math by at least 1 or more years. So the number of students that reach their typical growth. In addition, we look across that program level analysis to increase the number of students that are scoring on or above grade level. And similarly, we look at the cohort level analysis to increase the number of students scoring on or above grade level, again in reading and in mathematics. So when we talk a little bit about iReady, it's important to note that iReady is an outcome assessment. It gives us a good comparison of how same grade students are performing across the state, across the nation, and iReady breaks down the data. So on the top bar graph, you'll see the placement by domain. The reading scores are broken down into that phonological awareness. So that means the ability to blend and segment and delete sounds. Phonics is the ability to associate print with those sounds. High frequency words are a good indicator for comprehension for students, along with vocabulary. And then we look at comprehension of literature and informational text, oftentimes referred to as nonfiction. Similarly, in math, we break iReady down into 4 domains. We look at number and operations, algebra and algebraic thinking, measurement and data, and geometry. So one of the areas that we're going to focus on our conversation tonight concerns the iReady typical growth. The typical growth demonstrates the annual growth for an average student taking the iReady diagnostic. And it allows us, again, to make those comparisons between same grade level students and to see students that perform at that same baseline. How are they doing? So we have a lot of different data measures that we use, but the unique part about iReady is it lets us see a more global picture of how our students in Appleton are performing next to same grade peers. Additionally, the data that we use that happens more frequently than the iReady includes formative and summative assessments. One of the pieces that's new for us this year was that we added a literacy screener. So all of our K-2 students participate 3 times a year in a literacy screener. Our teachers have done just a fabulous job with this. They've really embraced it. And they've been able to use the screener to look at how students are performing in ways that we hadn't done before. And because it was so successful, you can see that we've also added some additional assessments. So where you see words of the core, that stands for the Consortium on Reading Excellence, on Reaching Excellence, excuse me. That's the assessment that we've implemented this year. And we have it broken down into phonemes and segmentation, quick writes, a variety of different assessments to help make sure that our students are learning and growing. The idea behind these assessments is that they form a foundational component to help us do a better job of predicting areas where students may have learning that's breaking down and areas where they are ready for acceleration. Combined, they make a good long-term outcome for fluency and comprehension to see how children are reading. Second and third grade, you'll see some of the similar assessments with a few additional assessments, knowing that reading is a complex skill. So we're focused on decoding those written words as well as comprehending text as a whole unit. And so our goal with these types of assessments that we use is to use the assessments often to prevent reading from becoming, those reading difficulties becoming entrenched. So it supports the iReady work that we do. And in math, something similar. We also have a screener. Kindergarten through 6th grade, we use the Math Forefront screener. This is a screener that's given, can be given 3 times a year. We ask that it's given twice a year, and it focuses on fact fluency at the grade level. It's a good indicator for us to identify students that may need some additional support and those who are already performing at a high level. In addition, we have formative assessments we use for math to take a look at how students are progressing through the units. We have summative unit assessments, and then of course we have the iReady diagnostic assessment. All of those 4 types of assessments really help us take a good picture of how students are progressing with their learning.
So as we begin the year, we look at the data from last year to set our goals for this year in each of those areas like Carrie talked about. So each building will have specific AGR performance objectives in reading and math, and they also will then meet as a PLC to plan for how they're going to achieve those objectives. Caleb, could you click on the link? I don't. Wasn't sure how I could do that. Okay, there we go. And we're not gonna spend much time on it. I know it's very small. But this is an example of what we do at the beginning of the year. Each PLC looks at their data and they establish strategies on how they're going to achieve that performance objective in reading and math. So it's very individualized based on each school and each PLC. Thanks, Caleb. The other thing that we have to support our AGR schools is an AGR work group. I know you've seen this list before and it's now grown. We looked at the end of in June to say who's missing at the table. And through that, we've added some additional folks related to like the Associate Director of Student Services. We've added some additional AGR teachers, literacy interventionists, math interventionists. So the team is very strong and is able to make sure that we have adequate representation, not only for each role, but for each AGR building. The focus areas for the AGR work group is to work with us as a lead team to establish and progress monitor the AGR performance objectives for each individual school, but also for us as a district of 7 schools in the AGR program. They also give us feedback on what we should report to you as part of our Board of Education presentations. In fact, Anne Marie and Katie will be taking that lead. What they'll be sharing tonight is directly from the groups that worked at our last AGR work group. We also, with our contract, need to look at addressing the question, how does instruction look different in an AGR classroom? And that is something that our work group works through in totality for all 7 schools, but we also have that question go back down to the individual grade level PLCs at each of the AGR buildings to talk through. And then any other self-identified areas.
So the data. So the data presented in the next couple of slides show our mid-year progress towards our achievement of the performance objectives of our students scoring at or above grade level by the end of the school year. So we look at data from AGR schools as well as Title I, not AGR, as they are similar in demographics. We also look at not school-wide title or AGR schools, as ultimately our goal is to be closing the achievement gap. And as Nan had mentioned, you'll see a couple asterisks for Columbus. Nan reminded us that that school is AGR, not part of the AGR program, as well as Richmond being a Title I targeted school. And Columbus has now shifted to a school-wide Title I school.
Okay, I'd like to discuss with you our mid-year outcomes so far in AGR schools as they compare with others. So the graph at the top shows grade level attainment, and you can see that 53% of AGR students are where we expect them to be, which is at or above grade level, as compared with 46% of kindergartners who attend Title I schools and 60% of kindergartners who attend non-AGR, non-title schools. Then the graph on the bottom shows typical growth. At this point of the year, we would like to see students, we would like to see that they've made 60 to 100% of their progress toward annual typical growth goals. And so AGR schools are currently at 54% as compared with 49% for non-title, non-AGR schools.
So before you go on, can you just explain that again, please? Because the bottom axis isn't labeled, and I didn't know really what it was. So this is percentage target, percent of their targeted growth.
That's right.
Okay, but so then your number, the 54%, could you just?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So each of the kind of clusters of bars, you can see it starts with 0 to 20% and then 21 to 40, then 41 to 60 and so on. We would want to see students at 60, is it 61 or 60?
60 at the point of the year, for 60% through the school year.
Yeah, so we would want to see students in those 3 clusters furthest to the right. Because that would mean that they've made more than half a year's worth of growth, or if it's at 100, a year's worth of growth already. So when we add.
Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you.
So if they're at 60, they made added growth for this point of the school year.
Sure. Thank you so much.
And I'm sorry, was it 54% you said was 16 above? That's the sum of those bars
Yeah.
on the three ones on the right. I have a question about typical growth. You described it earlier in the slideshow, but can you clarify, typical growth is the expected growth or the actual growth compared to other students?
Typical growth is what is expected by iReady based on where the student's baseline score is that fall.
Okay, and so it's individualized, but it's whether or not they've attained that. Okay.
Yep.
Can I ask a question to contextualize that, if you know? If a student is starting behind, and let's say they're, just for ease, I guess, like one grade level behind where they should be entering the year, how many years would they need to meet their typical growth target to get to grade level?
Curriculum Associates actually also creates a stretch growth goal for students who score behind grade level, and that when I met with our iReady coach, she said it could take, if a student reaches their stretch goal for 2 or 3 consecutive years, then typically they're on grade level.
Okay, and a stretch goal is more than typical growth goal though. So if they meet their typical growth goal, does that mean they're staying roughly a year behind grade level every year if they start behind but then make typical growth every year, roughly? Okay.
That's why the stretch growth is equally important, and even more so when we were trying to close the gap.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
And I guess one other thing I want is one thing that we also consider is the students that are at grade level or above, that we still want them to make a year's growth. So that's why typical growth was selected over stretch.
Yeah, and that certainly also does make sense. I feel like it'd be interesting to see the stretch growth as well, especially if we're thinking about catching kids up more so. Obviously, I think that would be helpful, though I do recognize we're already looking at a lot of information. So
would that be the plus on the 100+ in this graph?
100, the plus could mean that they've made more than a year's worth of growth already.
But doesn't necessarily mean they've made their stretch goal either, correct? It's like a prerequisite, but not the same. Yeah, okay.
So I guess if they're making their typical growth, they're not falling behind. However, they're not closing the gap. I guess, I mean, they're maintaining, but that's where that stretch growth comes in. And I think you'll see if, as we move on and move into math, you're gonna see that the growth for AGR students is higher than the other groups of schools that we're comparing, which is what we want to see.
Sure.
Students are coming in at a lower attainment level, however, they're growing at a faster rate. So that's what's causing them to close the gap.
Totally. And just to clarify, I do totally recognize the value in the data you're already showing us. So my request isn't, I hope, taken to discredit the information here, because obviously if you're behind, it's easy to get farther behind, easier to do that even than it is to catch up, and keep pace in many cases. So I just thought it'd be helpful to see both. So thank you.
To discuss first grade, so grade level attainment right now for first graders, 18% of AGR first graders are at or above grade level in reading, as compared with 26% of first graders who attend Title I schools and 33% of non-Title, non-AGR first graders. Not on the slide, data from our core phonics screener do indicate that students that are at AGR schools are performing at or slightly above students at Title I schools or non-Title, non-AGR schools. So not pictured, but pertinent.
There are other data sources that we look at. It's just not part of our performance objectives, like Carrie had mentioned.
As far as growth goes, 48% of AGR first graders have made adequate progress toward their targeted growth in reading, compared with 63% of Title I first graders and 55% of non-title, non-AGR first graders. Second grade, grade level attainment, 22% of AGR students are performing at mid, late, or above grade level in reading, as compared to the 21% of second graders who attend title schools and 35% of non-title, non-AGR students. For growth, 57% of AGR students are on target to meet their annual growth goal, compared with 53% of Title I non-AGR students and 70% of non-Title non-AGR students. Our core phonics screener showed that with explicit phonics instruction in AGR schools where that's been made a focus, and class sizes are also the chosen strategy, these students did outperform all other schools in the following areas measured by that assessment. Alphabet letters and sounds, consonant sounds, short vowels, long vowels, consonant blends, short vowel CVC, low frequency vowel and consonant spellings, and short vowel digraphs and trigraphs, which seems a little bit jargony, but all very important foundational skills for our primary learners. And then for third grade, talking about grade level attainment, 24% of third graders at AGR school are performing at mid, late, or above grade level in reading, compared with 20% of third graders at Title I non-AGR schools and 32% of third graders at non-Title non-AGR schools. And what that growth looks like, 60% of third graders at AGR schools are on track to meet their growth goals, compared with 64% of third graders at Title I schools who are on track and 62% of third graders at non-AGR and non-Title I schools. So fairly similar percentages. We are seeing some growth and we would like to continue to see growth in second semester.
All right, moving on to math, starting again at kindergarten, going through to third grade. If you look at the growth graph on the bottom, you'll notice that all of the orange bars in that 60 or above are higher than the green. So all of our AGR students, all of the bars are higher than the non-title, non-AGR. So that's huge for that stretch growth piece, that we've had more students attaining their growth than students at the non-AGR, non-title, which is what we want to close the gap. Then if you look at grade level attainment, 20% of AGR students are where we expect them to be at for mid or late above grade level, while Title I schools are at 23. So we're outperforming Title I schools there. Moving to first grade. Something to notice, I don't know if you looked at the grade level attainment for reading, but we did have a percentage of students at all of the clusters of schools performing two or more grade levels below. We have 0% performing at that large of a gap. So that is a good thing to see. And then we are just slightly below, a few percentage below at all other attainment areas. Looking at growth, 22% of students have already met their progress toward their growth target. They're at 100%. And then 40% of students are at the 60 and above at AGR schools and non-title, non-AGR. So we are at the same amount than at title non-AGR schools. So we're in line with growth with that group of schools. Looking at second grade, AGR students are only 1% below at 27% compared to title non-AGR students in the percentage that are on early or above grade level. And we're not outperforming, but also not underperforming in comparison. Looking at the growth graph on the bottom, 47% of AGR students are on target to meet their annual typical growth compared to 43% of students at Title I non-AGR schools. Then looking at third grade, if you look at the attainment, we are at a higher percentage of students at the early on and mid-grade level expectation than the title schools. So that's orange compared to yellow. So we are outperforming title schools. And looking at growth, if you look at the 60 to 100% progress range, we are at 47%, while Title I schools are at 41%, and non-AGR non-title are at 46. So we are out. We are closing the gap there in that third grade because we are farther along in meeting our growth goals in the AGR schools than in the other groups of schools. So again, we're seeing the growth that we would like, and if we continue on this trajectory, we're hoping to continue to close the achievement gaps.
So as we plan forward to this into the second semester, the AGR work group looks at global data as we presented to you. But then what also is provided is building level data, which each of the principals takes back to their leadership team, their CSIP team. But then it all goes down to the PLC level, and there they can go down to the student level. So all of this data is looked at very granularly at the PLC level. And one of the things that we did at our last AGR work group meeting is to talk about, okay, based on the data, what strategies are we going to put in place second semester so that we can achieve those performance objectives by the end of the year. And Kayla, if you just wouldn't mind clicking on that link, that was just the result of that work. The one column talks about what they did do. The chart that we showed you before said what they were planning on doing first semester. This says what they did do. And then the column furthest to the right talks about what the schools are going to be doing second semester as far as specific strategies to achieve those end of year performance objectives. So thank you, Kayla. So that concludes our report to you for first semester of the 23-24 school year. As per our contract, we'll be back in June and there'll be more lovely charts. And as you know, our goal is to move all of those colors from the left to the right as far as grade level attainment and targeted growth. So what questions do you have?
Couple of quick questions. Well, some questions. I can't guarantee they'll be quick, but I hope they will be. I guess one question I had is, it looks like there's a lot of work going into this in collaboration, and it sounds like the collaboration across schools and this is a helpful structure, I guess, to have. Is that a fair assumption from how I'm interpreting what I heard tonight? More or less, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Then one question I did have was, I noticed, because I know when we moved Columbus out technically and was it Highlands in, we said that things for Columbus wouldn't change. And I know the staffing structure sounds like that is true from what you shared earlier, but are they still invited or included in the collaboration? I just didn't see them on some of the links you clicked on where, at least they were tracking, it looked like in the same way. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for Columbus, their data is included in there. We don't have any of them on our work group because we're specifically working on the contract and the requirements related to that. So we're not reporting their data to the state. But certainly any of the things that we're doing, they're welcome to participate.
Okay, so they are still invited even though they aren't on the list of attendees. And
yes. Yeah, they're not required to be there, but they're always welcome.
Okay. That's helpful. And then I guess just on that note, then in the charts you showed us tonight, is there data included in those charts or is it out of those charts because you're not reporting it to the state?
No, if you look at that slide that Carrie looked at, they are included in the green or the orange.
The orange.
My color's wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, they were on
Okay.
the left.
Perfect. That's what I assume. I just wanted to double confirm because that's how I interpreted it. Just wanted to make sure there wasn't something missed there. Perfect. Great. Then I guess one other question about the actual data charts that we saw. Are those like charts that iReady like gives you in that format already? Or do you have to put those charts together yourselves, just out of curiosity?
And Kate, go ahead, Carrie.
One of our administrative assistants, Ann Kaler, helps put those together, but these are pulled from iReady.
Okay, perfect.
I can add to that related to Ann's work. because we're doing cohort data, she has to set up individual cohorts that will track year to year, because we want to make sure that they have received the lower class size throughout that full time period. So what we haven't reported here, but we are tracking, is the percent of students that at the end of the year that have been in the cohort from first grade to second grade. Because we want to make sure that as a program, that first grade is improving, but then as a cohort, they're improving as well.
Got
year to
it.
year.
Yeah, definitely a lot to track.
Very much so.
So I asked this question lightly then, knowing that, but I guess I'll say, like, when we're going through this like chart after chart after chart with so many bar graphs next to each other, you know, even though this is not my first rodeo at this point with it, I've had these a couple times. It's still just every time we come back to it, because we're not in this world a lot, it's kind of a lot to try to look at, interpret, and listen at the same time, especially when, and I'm not suggesting this, don't walk us through every single bar on every single graph, but when that's not the case, it's just a little tricky. But the points you were voicing were really helpful to understand. Is it possible to find a way to like convey a little bit more of the summary information on top of the charts that you're describing? Like, even, I don't.
Add our notes to it.
Yeah, I mean, it could even just be like, you know, a little bracket that's like this is the on track section and this is the roll up of those, since that's what you were speaking to mostly. Because it just became a lot trying to do both look and listen at the same time fast enough, and then process to engage to the degree that I think we all want to, at least I'll speak for myself, but.
Sure. Yeah, we certainly have the interpretation in the notes. So for us to be able to just produce it that way will not be a problem.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, just some kind of summary in that way would just be really helpful, but thank you very much for that.
Kind of right on that note, James. So my question is, maybe it's a little unfair because this is complex and requires nuanced understanding, but like, and we can also like hear about this information in many different ways in order to better understand it. So my question is, are the strategies working and are they worth it? And like, yeah, I would love to hear from a principal and maybe Dr. Wheeler or Assistant Superintendent Bono.
Start with the principals.
Sure, I can start. Okay. Yes, I
Sorry to put
definitely,
you on the spot.
I definitely think the data is the way it is because of the structures we have set up at the AGR schools, because of the students that attend them. A teacher with 14, 15 students at an AGR school has the same amount of needs, I think. I'm not working in a non-AGR school, but the amount of needs they come in and needs that need to be met before they can even access learning are much greater. So when you have a lower class size, you can meet with every student every day. Your small groups have 3 instead of your small group has 5 in it. And I think the students, we have to meet them at that basic need level in order for them to learn. And if I had to meet the basic needs of 30 students instead of 15, we would lose some of the students. I can speak as a principal too, just the size of the school and the size of the class. I can go into the class and I feel I know every single student and they know me and they know every student in their grade. And the classroom just really feels like a family, which is what those students need. They need school, they need their teacher. And I think the teacher is able to connect with each student on that basic need level when you have less of them in the room, which in turn allows them to access learning. Just a strategy that we're really focusing on is that vocabulary piece and building that background knowledge. So we look at that iReady data and there is a specific domain. So we look per grade level, which domain is the lowest, and it continues to be vocabulary for our school. So that is our CSIP goal, is to increase that vocabulary domain and for our EL population. We know what works for one group of students is not going to hurt any, so it's going to work for all. So that's something that we have academic, it says, I know I can use important words. Every classroom has the same thing, the same color,
and they know these are the important words. And that's something that has really helped. And we've seen a ton of growth in that vocabulary domain. So that's what I got off the cuff.
Nick, are you asking if, are you asking, when you're asking about the effectiveness of the strategies, are you talking about like the class size reduction strategy or the kind of strategies and implementation things being discussed at the site level with teams or both?
Yes.
Because if you're asking about like our PLC work and their kind of planning and reflection process, that works when we do it. Like, of course, if you say like, I'm gonna do some action research with my students, let's all try this in our team and see how it goes. And then if it doesn't go, like it's apparent, right, in the data. And if it does go, then you celebrate and do more of that. So I just think in addition to being able to lower our class sizes and like Katie alluded to, really know our students and let them know us and focus on learning, I think just this has brought some cohesiveness to our planning and process of reflecting as a team.
Being able to sit across the table from another third grade teacher at another AGR school. That's where I've seen the power. I mean, there's a lot of power in this, but they have data and can compare and say, well, gosh, your third grade did this, you know, what are you doing? And the sharing and the learning has been very helpful.
I really appreciated all of those responses, and it does help my understanding. So thank you.
Just a question, maybe looking at a little bit larger picture. But we often talk about the critical need, especially in reading, for our students to be basic, proficient, or advanced by the time you get to third grade. I realize you're two different measuring tools, but to help me understand and provide color to this, given where we're at today and the progress that we're seeing for second and third grade, does that help inform us or help us to predict or project how we're going to do when it comes time for third grade, fourth grade, when we go to those forward exams to really see where we're at? And if so, would you say we're on track, off track, in very good shape? I'm just trying to look for a gauge of, I understand this is mostly about gap reduction, but at the end of the day, it's all about hitting that proficiency, at least in third grade, as our first milestone. And it's hard for me to look at the data and know if we're tracking well, or are there cause for concerns?
Do you want to take that?
Sure. That's a great question that has a very long answer to it. But I think on the short end of that, when we look at any sort of data, whether it's AGR title, non-AGR, non-title, what we look at is we need a robust assessment inventory. We need screeners, we need diagnostic measures, we need progress monitoring measures, and we need outcome measures. You've heard all four of those tonight. So you heard us talk about screeners, which is very much like going to the doctor, having your temperature taken to see if there's cause for concern. Then we take a diagnostic to try to dive deep, which tries to determine what's causing that fever. Where is that learning really breaking down? We design the plan and we progress monitor it, just as you heard my colleagues talking about it, those PLCs, to be able to make sure that each student is progressing at the rate that they need to. And then we look at outcome assessments, which would be a version of iReady, to be able to say, how are we performing in comparison to other students? So all of that together gives us a good picture of where our kids are learning and growing, and what the research really tells us to focus in on our benchmarks for reading. So that first benchmark would be the alphabet. Do you know your letters? Something as simple as, do you know your letters? Do you know your sounds? And then the greatest indicator is that phonological awareness. That's why things like the core and the literacy screeners that we're doing really give us that foundation. iReady doesn't always dig down enough to that phoneme level to be able to help us understand that. So we have to supplement those assessments to see where our kids are learning. Once we do that, we can target instruction. That, combined with some of the field tests, the new resources that we've used, have really helped our teachers be able to increase their use of high leverage teaching routines. They've increased their progress monitoring. The conversations they have around how children learn and grow with literacy have really expanded. So in that capacity, we are making good gains. And what a pleasure it is to sit here and listen to my colleagues talk about AGR in comparison to as our bar graph had shown, some of our AGR schools are outperforming our title and our non-AGR. So that's positive. And then to Nick's question, if you have a chance to look at the link at the very end, which talked about those targeted strategies that each building is using, I think that's really where the magic is, because that's where we can really look at what each of those kids need. So it takes a lot of data to be able to predict what you're asking, but it's an important piece because each part of that data tells a little bit different story for us, and it helps us shape our instruction.
And we certainly know that we're not where we want to be. But it's through these things, plus with what we're doing curriculum wise and looking at the new reading materials and down the line, the math and our professional development for our staff, our teachers. They're doing a great job, but we will help with the professional development to learn best practices that are research-based currently.
It is interesting to see where we're at today with all the efforts that we're putting in and what impact the new curriculum is going to have and how much more gain we get from the new curriculum. But presumably we're going to continue to all these other efforts that we're doing, seeing if the new curriculum helps take us another leap forward in our proficiencies.
I always appreciate the AGR update. So I know how much work it is, so thank you for doing that. I know how beneficial assessments are, but there's always the pull between how much time the assessments take and the pull on teaching time. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, and also whether there's been an opportunity to survey classroom teachers as those have changed to see how they're feeling about it.
I've always shared that concern, Christine, especially when I was in the classroom, of always, how many times do I need to measure this elephant? It's not changing the weight of the elephant. But it's doing training and professional development with Carrie on structured literacy and just really learning how rooted effective instruction is. And that ongoing diagnostic assessment has really pushed my thinking in that. And I think that what we have in the core phonics screener and some of the formative assessments that are used in between, our teachers really value in terms of what they're learning about their students and being able to learn more frequently about what our students know to be able to respond more frequently in a timely way with our instruction.
Something to add to that. Several of the assessments are one-on-one interview based. So while it is time away from the class, it is that one-on-one time with teacher and student. It's not a student clicking on a computer. So it's more accurate. And at the younger levels, it does go pretty quickly. So like Anne Marie said, we sacrifice the time of assessing, but what's that information going to do to inform instruction? So it's a give and take, but it's necessary. And I think our teachers are using it very appropriately to inform instruction, and we're seeing the growth because of it.
I think I just want to add too, we're also changing the way that we do assessments. In years past, it used to be paper, pencil, whole class used to be quite quiet. Then it transitioned to more of that computer-based or CAT, computer-assisted technology, where kids are taking it. Now, as Katie had shared, we do a mix of that one-on-one component for some of our screeners. There's an interview piece, but there also is a paper piece. But we've even started to shift in our field tests. We've seen even when our Blevins field test, where there's smaller groups of students that are taking assessments. And so instead of having the assessment be an event, it's done in portions and it's done over a period of time. And it's a different way to look at assessment literacy. And we've seen some positive growth over that, and something that certainly is important for AGR to be able to look at, because we do have those smaller class sizes. We can assess students and we can approach that assessment in a way that feels a lot more like a conversation for our kids rather than an event. And I think at that point, we also get truer data because there's not so much stress for our learners as they go through that.
I appreciate that. And sometimes we've heard that it's a little bit challenging to do that individual assessment and still engage the rest of the class. So that's why part of the reason I asked the question is, if you've had feedback from the educators in that.
Not as much as I used to.
Yeah.
I mean, when we were doing benchmark running records and trying to find the precise IRL, my God, I mean, this is the assessments that we're using are quick. And I think the reason we maybe don't hear as much about it is they're valuable. They're quick, they're valuable. We learn a lot about our students and you can implement stuff in your teaching the next day.
That's great to hear. I do have a couple of other questions. Kind of related to James's question about Columbus. Nan, you had mentioned the power in having teachers from various schools sit together and look at data and then think about how, what they're doing in the classroom that might affect it. So I guess I'm just wanting some clarification, whether the Columbus staff is a part of that or how that is facilitated.
Our AGR work group meets for 2 hours twice a year. So we met for 2 hours in February, and then we'll meet 2 hours in June. So we do not have them on an official attendance list, but I certainly we'll talk with Joel and they're welcome to join us.
I do also believe that that's so powerful when you have different people participating. So I just want to make sure that they have those opportunities.
Yeah, we want to make it relevant for them. A lot of what we're talking about is our specific performance objectives. And so completing the obligations of the contract, which really they don't have at this point. But we can certainly look at what part of those 2-hour sessions would be most valuable to them.
Thank you. And then my last question has to do with iReady. Are all students afforded the opportunity to use the iReady individualized programming at this point?
Yes.
Yes.
And at one point, we did hear that there was a possibility that that may not be so going forward. And I'm just wondering if that has been decided at all for going forward on for AGR schools.
Not for next year. Yeah, we have not made the decision for next year. It is an expense and we're following the budget presentation. So all of that has to come on the table to decide where we're going to spend those dollars that we have. But no, we have not made a decision for next year yet.
Thank you. I appreciate all of your answers.
I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. The tools that you're describing, the screeners, assessments, diagnostics, those are in use at all the schools, right? So kind of where the rubber meets the road on the AGR piece is really about the class size and how those teachers are effectively using that data, those tools to reach the students that are most in need. Is that accurate?
It goes back to that question that is part of the contract, which is how does instruction look different in a classroom with fewer students? And as Katie mentioned, just the opportunity to meet with them in smaller groups more often, one-on-one more often, have greater connections with families because there's fewer families to reach. I mean, certainly the referendum for the K2 class size stood on the shoulders of our AGR schools to say that this is important. And it was something that the teachers were asking for.
And then one last question. It's not presented here. I'm not sure if it's even relevant or not, but are you tracking historically how the AGR schools are doing? I know this is really individual years, right? So would that be relevant? Is that something that you're tracking? Is that useful at all? Can you kind of describe maybe how historically the tools and the systems that we're putting in place to address AGR have worked over time?
We've tracked as much as we can when the assessment has been the same. We do feel now with tying it directly to the scorecard, we're going to be able to have greater opportunity to look for longitudinal data. And in particular that we've now been able to go to a cohort level and we're able to look for an increase down to the specific PLC grade level at each building. Before we had just general marks, general goals for all the AGR schools, but we felt that we need to be specific to that individual grade level on each individual AGR school. So now that we have it that way, and this is starting year 2, we are going to be able to keep that longitudinal data and keep trying to increase every year.
Also, so AGR asks for 18-1, like the class size reduction is 18-1 in those specific grade levels, K through 3.
K through 3.
And our, our referendum, which is district wide, is that K through 2nd grade would be 20-1. So with the referendum, the AGR schools will be like, theoretically, they would be 2 students less per classroom. Is
And
that
actually,
correct?
what we do with AGR schools for kindergarten through 3rd, we take their enrollment divided by 15. So you will have a range. We do have some that are up to 18, but many of them are at 15, 14.
And I guess, the reason I'm asking this is really just so like the AGR schools, you all have a contract and you have requirements that you need to report out because of this contract. That doesn't prohibit any of these strategies, tools, or anything else from being used district-wide. You're coming to us in this way because it is part of the grant that you have to give out regular reports on this. But I'm guessing, and maybe someone could provide a little more information, that many of these strategies and like as Jason pointed out, all of the assessments, those are being used district-wide, correct?
Correct. And I think if you look at a lot of those strategies that the AGR schools listed, they are happening in our other, even our non-title schools. It's good teaching. It's just being part of the grant and part of the contract, as you mentioned, Nick, we come together and it provides an opportunity for our AGR schools to learn from each other and to really talk about, 20 students in a kindergarten class versus 14. We can still do even more and have more contact time with those students and families. So how can we capitalize on that with the additional the lower class size?
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much. And we'll see you again in the summer. In June. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move to board business. First would be the AP check register for February. Is there a motion to approve?
Excuse me, I have to abstain due to conflict.
Okay. Someone besides Ed, make a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. All right, any questions or discussions? Okay, roll call, please. Kayla?
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
Edward Ruffalo, Chris Sauter,
Aye.
Kay Ager,
Aye.
James Bacon,
Aye.
Peng Tao,
Aye.
and Nick Ross.
Aye.
Okay, the next would be the e-school charter contract renewal. This was presented and discussed at length at our February 26th meeting. There aren't any additional questions. I know there are individuals here that could answer questions if we have more. But otherwise, would there be a motion to approve the 5-year contract renewal for?
Motion to approve the 5-year contract renewal.
Second.
Okay, then roll call, please.
Kay Ager,
Aye.
Nick Ross,
Aye.
Chris Sauter,
Aye.
Edward Ruffalo,
Aye.
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
James Bacon,
Aye.
and Peng Tao.
Aye.
Okay, then 10C would be OE10, learning environment and student behavior revisions. Mr. Hartjes.
Yes, so Laura Jackson is also here with us if we have any questions for her. But I'll summarize this in that we've been working on OE10, the monitoring document, for quite a few meetings. And we've got a couple more revisions here tonight to go through. And so I'll just walk you through those. The first one is 10.1.4. That indicator, the previous language referred to a baseline year. And rather than using that, we said, let's call it the prior year. And we just cleaned up a little bit of language about greater than or equal to 90%. And so then we match that with the language that we're using for 10.6.5. So some minor changes there, just in the wording, not in the content of the indicator. And then under 10.6.1, we were really struggling with, there were two almost completely different pieces to it. One was referring to ODRs, and the other one was referring to anonymous reports that we currently get through SUSO. So we just separated those out. And so now 10.6.1 refers to office discipline referrals, and we're stating that they're closed out in Infinite Campus. And all behavior incidences are assigned a resolution, which we can document in Infinite Campus. And then 10.6.2, the anonymous reports regarding student behavior are reviewed by an administrator as evidenced by the responses in the anonymous reporting system data. Again, that's SUSO at this time. And then we had to move everyone down. So we created a new 10.6.2. And then 10.6.5, which was 10.6.4, we just reworded that to match the prior year. And again, greater than or equal to 90%. Or 80% or less than 80%. And then that tells us how much we're looking to improve each year. So those were the changes to OE10 or OE10 learning environment student behavior.
I'll make a motion to approve OE10 with the revisions described.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I appreciate the revisions to 10.6, and especially I feel like the new 10.6.1, for example, is much more compliance indicator than it was before. So
Okay, if there's nothing else, then roll call, please.
Ping Tao,
Aye.
Nick Ross,
aye.
Kay Ager,
Aye.
Chris Sauter,
Aye.
Jason Kolpak,
Aye.
James Bacon,
Hi.
Ed Ruffalo.
Aye.
Okay, that takes us to the end of our business. We do have a work session coming up on March 13th. And then also a board meeting on the 18th. And I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn meetings.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, good night. Thank you all. See you again.